Welcome to What's the Big Idea? I'm your host, Dan Carney. I'd like to think of today's episode as a bit of a palate cleanser. I think we all could use that. From all the outrageous videos and insane news, and if you spend any time on LinkedIn, just whatever that is. For this episode, I called up friend of the pod, Amy Fast, who is a superintendent in Oregon. She was on the show a couple of years ago, and we had a lot of fun talking about trends and current happenings in education. And I thought now's a great time to have her back to play a little game and see where we are. A survey, you might say, of the education landscape. We're talking about phones, AI, recess, standardized testing, and I really appreciate Amy's insights. And like I said, this is just a good moment to take stock of where we are, step back from some of the hellscape that's out there in the media, and really think about what are the big issues impacting our students, impacting us, and where is education in 2026? All right, hope you enjoy this conversation with Amy Fast.
Yeah, I'm Amy Fast. I currently am a superintendent at Dayton School District in Oregon. What else do you want to know?
I think last time we spoke, were you a principal then?
Yeah, I think I was a high school principal at the time, probably.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks. I always said the district office is where educators go to die, and then here I am. But there's a lot of plus sides to being able to set the vision of a district. So that's the nice part.
What's been the single biggest change moving from
not being around kids?
Yeah.
So your biggest source of fulfillment and you're kind of the reason you are in the field in the first place is kind of not as in sight on a day-to-day basis as would be helpful, I think.
Yeah. When we speak again in 2 years, you'll be the Secretary of Education for Oregon. It won't exist at the national level.
I don't know. Yeah, good point. I don't know about that, but I appreciate your faith in me.
Well, last time we spoke, we played this little game, over, under, or properly rated, and talking about trends in education. And I thought we could do something like that this time. I always chuckle at sort of the hot take industry of the media, whether you're watching news or whatever. Everyone needs to have their strong opinion. So I thought we could kind of use that framework. Not that we have to have hot takes.
Sounds good. I'm such a gray area person too. My answers are probably not going to be as...
I don't imagine any of these will actually have absolutist, statements, but let's just go for it and see how it works. So I call this hot take or hard truth. All right. So is it sort of just this passing trend, or is there some truth to this? So I'll jump right in with the first one. Let you go ahead and share your thoughts, and I can weigh in too. And like you said, the answer is probably in the gray area, but let's have some fun with it. All right, cool. Let's just go with a big one to start. Coming off the top turnbuckle, as they say in wrestling, just going big. First one, hot take or hard truth. AI is forcing schools to finally admit that our old assignments don't work anymore.
The phrasing of the statement makes me want to say it's a hot take. I think it's exposing that they never really did work in the first place. And so, AI, because it's kind of it reminds me of when Google was accessible to everyone. And there was that whole statement of if kids can just Google it, you shouldn't be teaching it. I don't know if I would swing that far on the spectrum, but I do think it's here and it's a reality for our students, and we need to help them adapt to that world. And if our students should be thinking critically and practicing the skills that they will need in their real world, which is deducing what sources are credible and unpacking information with their peers and discussing and debating ideas and theories and looking at the extent to which the information that they're looking at is factual, then, you know, AI is just another tool in helping them do that, and it can't do that work for them. So we just probably it's exposing a little bit of where we never really were hitting the mark when it came to pushing our students to think critically in the first place. That's my take anyway.
Yeah. When you talk about it in your district office, do you find that there's more, like, what's the vibe? Is it like optimism? Is it fear? Is it how would you describe the way people are thinking about it and feeling about it?
I think it's people are fearful right now. There's, these more philosophical stances of just the impact that AI has currently on society and resources and all that, and the economy and all those pieces. So then there's people up here that are kind of philosophizing about AI in general and its presence in our society. And then there's the extent to which it's used or forbidden in classrooms. And that conversation is preceding, unfortunately, the conversation about what is it we're trying to accomplish with students. And then we can fit in and where, to me, AI belongs and doesn't belong in the context of that conversation. But part of that conversation is what we want students to learn. It kind of needs to be ever changing with society as well, because it is a tool that they're going to use, and we can't just pretend like it doesn't exist until they get out in the real world. And now it's something they're expected to know how to do in their role in employment.
Yeah, I was late to this call because we were in a planning meeting for next year, and one of the things we just were talking about was, are we going to offer coding as a class, which we've been doing for years? And it's like, but is that even relevant now? It's like,
right.
So, but it also makes us say, well, what is the class instead? What is the AI class? And how do we make sure that we're not so much teaching it, but how are we helping kids understand this is the new reality,
right?
That there's things you can do with it, whether it's problem solving or helping develop ideas you have. But it really is kind of makes you stare a lot of what you already have right in the face and say, is this what we still want to do?
Right. And it can be kind of tricky when we compartmentalize it like that too, like coding as a separate class or AI as a separate class, because that's just not the way that people think and work, right? Like, I'm going to be writing right now, and then I'm going to go to my AI portion of the day. It's like, how is it all interwoven?
No, and that's a great point too, right? Because it's like we say, we're all language teachers. There's AI in everything. So even putting it to the side. Okay, great. Let's go to our next statement. Hot take or hard truth? Recess is treated like a break from learning instead of a part of learning.
Am I saying hot take or hard truth on that it is treated as that, or that it is that?
It's treated like that.
Let's
just take the statement.
It is a hard truth that recess is treated as such. I would disagree that recess is a break from learning. And in fact, I think some of the behaviors that we're seeing, or I would say lagging social skills we're seeing in a lot of our youth, are due to the lack of unstructured play that they experience early on in their lives, whether that was due to the pandemic or cracking down on academic skills at the expense of play and not weaving that into the learning. Because we see that, and I'm going to probably take some heat for saying this, but oftentimes we read every conflict as bullying. There is legit bullying that happens in schools, but that is different from just conflict that's a part of childhood development. That's a very important part of it for students to learn how to advocate for themselves, how to navigate relationships, how to choose friends, how to, stand up for others. All those pieces of the puzzle, we if they're not getting that on, their neighborhood street like we did when we were kids, because they've, are plugged into a device, or there was a pandemic or what have you, then they're not going to get that at school if we don't have those unstructured opportunities for play either. But I do think it's very much treated as that in the school system for the most part.
Yeah, I completely agree. Hard truth for sure. And recess is always the thing that can get chopped, nibbled around the edges when
Mhm.
you need to make
Yeah.
time for something else. But the unstructured part's really important too,
Mhm.
because sometimes recess turns into it's outside, it's not
Right.
class, but it's
Yeah.
highly structured, it's highly
Yes.
controlled, it's highly
Controlled. Mm.
monitored. There's just
Yeah.
adults just kind of watching, and
Yes.
that's not really good
Yes.
for anyone either.
Yeah. Exactly. Mhm.
What's the is there a recess policy in your district, or is there a way that you sort of
No,
talk about
but I do
yeah.
think it's one of those things that when the Department of Education, the State Department, is saying, creating all these operating standards for school, and you have to have this much time for this and this much time for this, and like just by virtue of meeting all those requirements, other things are chipped away at that maybe are also important, but not necessarily seen as an academic lever. And so I do think that recess time has diminished over the years in education, and like you said, almost become overly structured because children are presenting with these behaviors, so we need to create a more controlled environment, but then they don't get to practice those skills, and so it perpetuates itself.
For sure. And for some kids, it's probably just the same thing they get when they're not at school.
Yeah.
Highly structured play time, and we
Yeah.
need to give them that freedom. Okay. Hot take or hard truth? Kids still like to read. They just don't like to read books.
Um, I I don't know. That's a hard one for me. I almost want to say it's a hard. I don't know. I don't know if they like to read. I'm unsure about that, but it could be a hard truth in that there has been a decline in stamina of reading, and the platforms for reading have changed, and that might be, what part of that stamina is due to. But also, we have lost a lot of reading for pleasure in schools, and a lot of it has become drill and kill. And so I do think students have lost their love for reading, but I don't think that's on students. I don't think we have just some inherently different generation, other than the fact that they grew up with, devices and the ability to look things up online, and, checking out a book at the library is not necessarily the world that they live in. And so we do have an obligation. It's kind of like AI in that I think there's a lot of value to physical reading, or reading books that you can hold in your hand, novels, but we also have an obligation to make reading feel relevant to them and enjoyable to them, and also help them build stamina. So help them practice what that endurance feels like when they're doing hard things.
Yeah, stamina is such an important part of the equation. Just being able to endure sounds terrible, but just like
Yeah.
keep going through it, but it's not maybe the most pleasurable reading, or maybe
You and I
this
read
part
things every day. Like for the majority of our
yeah,
day, they're not things we would choose to read if we were home on a
yeah,
Saturday afternoon, right? And so
right.
that is a reality, is the stamina piece of it, and deciphering things that maybe you wouldn't otherwise choose to read on your own. That being said, there's also such value in reading because you're just loving it and you're growing as a person through all these stories that you're unpacking over the years in your mind while you're reading for that enjoyment. So it's a both and situation for me, but I do think that students in general have lost their love and stamina for reading for the most part.
Yeah.
So I
I was
don't
just
think it's
doing
on there.
yeah. I was just doing some ELA program review with some teachers looking to adopt something new, and I was just surprised at how many of them don't include whole books,
Yeah.
full
Yeah.
books. And
It's
I
scary.
just don't see how you foster like a real
Mhm.
love of reading if you
Right.
don't say like, this is the book, we're going to read this
Yes.
book.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I really don't think, where did I just see this recently about, somebody proselytizing about AI in schools. And it was sort of like about, oh, maybe it was alpha schools. And like one of the ways they do literature, it was sort of like AI creating texts based on student interest.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, I understand the student interest part, but there's something human about reading a book that a lot of other people have read.
Yeah. Yep. Shared experience. Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Hot take or hard truth? Teacher retainment has a simple fix. Just pay them more. I actually read that somewhere recently.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say it's a hot take, but in the same breath, I'm going to say the teaching profession needs to be respected more and compensated accordingly. But I just don't, I mean, it's even according to most research, people feel burnout when they don't feel their work matters or they don't feel valued in it. It's not really, I mean, the compensation actually can contribute to that sense of value or not being valued. But I think that teachers burn out because there's a lot of places where what we ask them to do is insurmountable. It's just like be the kid's therapist and be their educator and be their parent and be their, like their doctor, all the things. And it is not enjoyable when you come to work every day and don't feel successful. And then they're evaluated by society by these metrics that aren't aligned to what matters most in their jobs. And so there's this disconnect between how they're valued by society and what they know the real work is. And that can be really demoralizing too. So I think, the work doesn't feel good because we get paid a lot or because it's easy. The work feels good when it matters. And I think we've lost a big sense of that in education. And especially, just look at our country right now and how valued public education is. So, how can teachers not consider leaving the profession when, the whole profession can feel in jeopardy right now?
When you talk with teachers in your district, what's the number one pressure point, do you think, on them? The kind of pressure point that could erode their willingness to stay in the profession?
Not feeling like they're treated as experts in their craft, whether that be by parents or by us as administrators. And so, not being heard and not being valued for the experience and ideas they bring to the table, I think is usually the reason.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, because building a teacher up can take a while, but bringing a teacher down is it's like that.
Yeah, one moment. Yep. Same with students, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Teaching is such a vulnerable profession, and so for that reason, it really can be. Your confidence can be shaken so quickly.
And when you say it that way too, like sometimes, at least in my experience, it was a sprint, not a marathon, in that I'm like all in hardcore, parents in my class have my cell phone number and I'm staying late and making sure that the kids get it. And if they're struggling socially or emotionally, it's weighing on me and I'm losing sleep at night. And so I was taxed by the sheer responsibility of owning like human growth. And I couldn't pace myself in a way that I could do it for 30 years. And I don't know if that makes any sense. It wasn't about
totally
not thinking the work was important or not, or wanting to like move up the chain or be an administrator to make more money. It was just like, I couldn't even be healthy with, parenting's hard. And it's not, I don't think I could do that for 30 years. Like you would need to parent toddlers, you know what I mean? Or whatever age it is, staying in that phase for 30 years is just, and doing it that well, that's a grind. So for me, it was like, I was 10 years in the classroom, 5 years as an instructional coach. And those 10 years in the classroom, I wasn't feeling burnt out on the profession or jaded or cynical. I was just tired, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
You invest so much emotionally. There's the work, there's the intellectual, there's the mental work, and then there's all the emotional work.
It's a lot.
Hot take or hard truth? Schools need to get off screens and back to pencil and paper.
this is another one of those gray areas. I'm going to say hot take, but with the caveat that I do think we have kids on screens too much in general in schools and outside of schools. And I think, Oregon passed a law that there are no cell phones. Kids cannot have cell phones in schools. So from the time they're on the bus till they're off the bus, it's just not allowed. And that I do think has helped with students' social skills. It's helped with their attention spans. It's helped with their engagement. And yet they're going to also have, like, my daughter's a senior in high school, and there was a rule for a long time in our house that you couldn't have your cell phone in your room when you went to bed, just because it's healthy not to. And, as a parent, you need to police some things. But there's also my responsibility to make sure that once my kids are my own, like, children are off to college or off to the workforce or whatever they're going to do, that they can regulate themselves and, know how to use whatever tools are at their disposal responsibly. So for me, we also have the responsibility of teaching students that responsibility. So if they are juniors or seniors in high school, maybe those parameters are loosened. I think the same with AI. You get to the certain point of proficiency and you earn this ability to use this tool now. And these are the parameters you can use it with. And if you go outside of those parameters, we ratchet it back again. But I think it's hard to say that juniors and seniors in high school can't, will get a referral if they pull their cell phone out. But then the second they walk across that stage, they're going to be expected to know when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate, put it away when they're on the job, take it out when they need to schedule a meeting. You know what I mean? So we need to work with that as they get older, I think.
I agree. It feels like the tide has really shifted on phones.
Mm-hmm.
It happened fast.
Yeah, it really did.
One of my statements here was about phones, but we just talk about it now. It's like, and I don't know if it was Jonathan Haidt's book, maybe it just accelerated things, but something shifted very quickly. And for a while there was that sort of what you're describing, people saying, yeah, but this is their life, this is the real world.
Right.
But you're putting that up against brain development. And
right.
I think your junior senior point is a really good one, where there's stages of development where there maybe is a loosening of that.
Yeah.
Originally, this particular statement was because I've seen it's so interesting. I've been feeling this for maybe the last couple of years, but now I'm really starting to see it. A pushback against Chromebooks.
Yep.
Chromebooks, I guess they were pretty prevalent before COVID. I mean, I can't even remember. Life before COVID is like, I don't know. It's like in black and white in my head, but then suddenly they just were like everywhere. Right.
Yeah.
And it feels like the pendulum is starting to come back, where people are saying, well, hold on, just because we have these doesn't mean every single, what's the situation in your district?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a push toward not using them exclusively and using them again when it's an appropriate tool. But there is a lot of, especially at the elementary school level, leaning into, writing by hand because of the difference in what's happening in your brain and your ability to retain things in your long-term memory and thinking through the end of your pencil or whatever it's called. It is a different process that's happening in your brain than when you're on the Chromebook. So I think there's, again, a time and a place for those things. And there are times where I would rather have a student on a Chromebook, maybe even engaged in some kind of app for learning that would save the teacher all this planning time otherwise to develop these practice tools. So it's be strategic about what students are learning and when, and then what's the most appropriate tool for that learning. It's not this is bad, this is good, but what is it we're trying to accomplish? And is this the right platform to accomplish that,
Totally. It's when is it additive and not just replacing with,
Yes.
It's kind of the point you made about AI. Yeah. How about this one? This one we're talking a lot about in our middle school right now is hot take or hard truth. Grades motivate students in the short term, but undermine learning in the long term.
I'm going to have to say hard truth with that one. I mean, I think it's tricky, right? Because there is an element. The argument is super valid that kids need to turn in things on time. They need to have consequences for not. I also agree theoretically the consequence for not doing the learning should be doing the learning. But I think that what you measure is what typically the system acclimates to. And so because we measure completion of work for the most part, then that's what our system acclimates to. And I do struggle with the education researchers and gurus who say basically all grades should just be based on what a student knows and is able to do. Because I'll tell you, when I'm as an employer, I have never, when I've struggled with an employee, it's never been because like, oh, their math proficiency just isn't up to par. It's like time management is a problem, or like teamwork or whatever it is. And so for me, those things that matter in the real world, quote unquote, for employability skills or just functioning in the world in a way that is productive are not the things that we measure in schools. And so for me, grades are very much measuring, are you doing what the teacher has asked you to do? Whether that is, turning in work on time or what have you. I can't say that a student who has a B in their chemistry class, I can't tell you what they know in chemistry, but I could guess as to how much work they've turned in and what their grade has been on tests, maybe, which could correlate to that. But I think we need to do a better job. Again, it comes back to what exactly are we trying to accomplish? And then what's the best to measure for that? And there needs to be a way to measure those foundational or employability skills, of collaboration and communication and leadership and all that. But also a way within that is compliance, because are you going to do what your boss tells you to do and you're going to do it on time? Like time management can be one of those. And then separate from that is the proficiency grade. And also in this subject, how much do you know and are you able to do? And the combination of those two metrics should give you a pretty holistic image of a student, I would think.
Yeah. We've tried sort of pulling out those, almost immeasurables in a way, like what you talked about, the time management and the collaboration. It's like almost like a separate grade. To your point, where we want the grade to sort of be what the person can do and what they know. But then when you do that, you end up having all the attentions on that grade.
Yeah.
And then the thing that you set up, this measures all the other things. They're like, well, I don't care about that. I mean,
yeah.
Great. But then to your point, if you lump it all together, suddenly it just becomes like a compliance indicator. And it's like, well, how's that? But I do love your analogy to, your employees. It's like, you're not really ever saying like, this teacher just doesn't really know anything about science, so I need to.
Right.
It's just not really how it works. Yeah.
No one cares about that. Yeah.
Do you have any like trends or things that kind of floating through your office, through your mind about education that you kind of feel like people are always kind of having a strong opinion on?
I mean, the ones that are most prevalent, you definitely have covered here for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to think on that.
Yeah, that's cool. I just had one last one. And it's, semi-related to the grades one, but I'll just go for it.
Yeah.
High stakes testing has improved accountability, but destroyed curiosity.
I would say hard truth. Yeah. I do think, there's a level of needing some standardization to know where you're at in comparison, to a constant benchmark, as a superintendent, where's my school district at in comparison? There's some value to that. But also, like I said before, when your metrics are lopsided or leaning heavily in one direction in terms of what's valued, you end up losing all the other things that doesn't test or cover. And so I do think like you were talking about, not reading full texts anymore, full novels. And I think that's a product of standardized testing, not just student endurance or stamina in reading. And so imagine going 13 years, kindergarten through 12th grade, and all your reading is like short passages with
passages.
Look, I would stop reading entirely if that was my if that was my experience with reading. And so I think that we have replicated the vibe of standardized tests in school to prepare students for standardized tests, and it's just not deep thinking or learning. And I love that Mike Schmoker, who can be a controversial educational author, but when he talks about like nobody reads in the way that we teach, like, oh, that was just dramatic irony, and here's a metaphor coming up, and like I'm not thinking those things when I'm reading. I'm thinking about the deeper meaning of the text and the implications of that, and then those other pieces can be woven in, like in terms of, well, this is why it felt so profound when you read it, because that was a metaphor, or whatever. But the way we teach is just, is this a metaphor, a simile, or and like no one's reading like that in real life. So kids don't.
We have relationships with books.
Yeah, exactly.
And we strip that out when we sort of kind of codify. Yeah, use this symbol to indicate this in the text.
Yes.
Seems like
it's exhausting for kids, I'm sure.
Actually, I'm really curious. In your setting there in the superintendent's office, how much conversation is there actually about your test scores versus everything else going on in the district?
There is not a lot about scores. I would say that, the board is very much interested in that because we haven't been academically successful. There's a long history of like success in athletics, but not academics in Dayton. So we're wanting to change that branding and that experience for students. So in that it's what they have to go by to measure our district, I think there's conversation that happens there. I try really, really hard as a superintendent to basically start that conversation from scratch with our administrative team and our leadership team, which is, what are we trying to accomplish with kids? How do we best measure that? How do we know if we're successful? Because I still think there's a measurement for that. And some of that might be pulled from standardized tests, but we try to develop that internally as much as possible, because it is too easy to play the game of school, play the system to get the scores versus giving kids an authentic learning experience and one that matters. So,
yeah. Of all the education buzzwords, I do think authentic still has some power left to it.
Yeah. I hope that
most of them are just sort of floating away.
Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Amy, it's a Thursday afternoon. Both of us have had, the long day, and I appreciate you jumping on and talking this with me. It's always fun chatting with you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Dan.